Welcome to Truth Behind History. If you're new here, we dive deep into the stories and forces that have shaped the modern world. And today, we're tackling one of the most remarkable economic transformations in history, the rise of China's economy. Now, when we think of economic superpowers, China is impossible to ignore. It has skyrocketed from a relatively isolated, state-controlled economy to becoming the second-largest GDP in the world. And it all started with one of the most pivotal shifts in modern history, the economic reforms of 1978. Before this transformation, China's economy was rigidly controlled by the state, operating under a centrally planned system. That means the government dictated production, prices, and even the types of industries allowed to function. Private enterprise? Almost non-existent. Foreign investment? Virtually banned. The country was economically stagnant, with low productivity, weak innovation, and widespread poverty. Then, under Deng Xiaoping's leadership, China opened its doors, but not all at once. Instead of a sudden shift to capitalism, China experimented cautiously. It introduced market-oriented reforms, allowed limited private businesses, and set up special economic zones, SEZs, designated areas where foreign investment, private enterprise, and export-oriented production were encouraged. This was a game-changer. It turned China into a manufacturing powerhouse, fueling rapid industrialization, surging exports, and a skyrocketing GDP. Over the next 4 decades, China lifted hundreds of millions out of poverty, built the world's largest middle class, and established itself as a dominant force in global trade, technology, and supply chains. But here's the big question: how did China pull this off? What specific policies, strategies, and key industries fueled this meteoric rise? That's what we'll break down in this video, step by step, so stick around. The heart of China's economic transformation lies in its bold shift toward market-oriented policies. But what exactly does that mean? Essentially, China moved away from a fully state-controlled economy and introduced policies that encouraged private enterprise, foreign investment, and a competitive market environment, but always with strict government oversight. One of the most important moves was the introduction of special economic zones, SEZs. These weren't just random economic experiments, they were carefully planned testing grounds for capitalism within a still socialist country. The first SEZs were established in coastal cities like Shenzhen, Xiamen, and Zhuhai, places strategically chosen for their access to global trade routes. Within these zones, businesses were given tax breaks, relaxed regulations, and incentives to attract foreign companies. The results? Explosive growth. Foreign companies, particularly from Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Western nations, flooded into these zones, bringing capital, technology, and expertise. Factories sprang up overnight, and China quickly became the world's leading exporter of manufactured goods. But it wasn't just about foreign money. China also allowed domestic entrepreneurship to flourish for the first time since the communist takeover in 1949. Farmers were granted greater autonomy through the household responsibility system, where they could sell surplus crops for profit. Small private businesses, once outlawed, were now tolerated and later encouraged, giving rise to China's first generation of private entrepreneurs. Another critical policy was foreign direct investment, FDI, liberalization. Before, China was closed off to global investors, but starting in the 1980s, the government actively courted foreign businesses, offering incentives like joint ventures with state-owned enterprises, relaxed ownership rules, and tax benefits. This turned China into a magnet for international capital, especially from multinational corporations looking for cheap labor and efficient supply chains. And then, of course, there were large-scale infrastructure projects. The Chinese government poured massive amounts of money into developing highways, ports, railways, and airports to support its booming industrial economy. The result? A supercharged logistics network that allowed China to ship goods faster and cheaper than almost anyone else. But here's the thing: China didn't fully embrace Western-style capitalism. Instead, it developed what we call state capitalism, a unique model where the government still heavily influences major industries. Large state-owned enterprises, SOEs, dominate key sectors like banking, energy, and telecommunications, ensuring the government maintains control over strategic parts of the economy. This blend of market-driven growth and state control is what makes China's economic model so fascinating and controversial. Unlike the United States, where private businesses operate largely independently, in China, the government always has a hand on the wheel, shaping policies and directing capital where it sees fit. And the impact? China's GDP has exploded since these reforms began. What was once an economically stagnant nation is now a $17 trillion economy, on track to overtake the US in total GDP within the coming decades. But raw numbers only tell part of the story. To understand China's economic growth in real-world terms, let's take a look at the hard data, from GDP growth trends to trade surpluses and foreign investment. One of the most impressive aspects of China's rise is its GDP growth trends. In 2024, China's GDP grew by 5%, and projections for 2025 suggest a 4.6% increase. Now, you might be thinking, that doesn't sound that high. But let's put that into perspective. For most developed nations, a GDP growth rate of 2 to 3% is considered solid. China, despite being the second largest economy in the world, is still growing at a pace that dwarfs Western economies. And historically, the numbers were even more staggering. During its peak industrial boom in the 1990s and early 2000s, China experienced double-digit GDP growth for nearly 2 decades straight, something no other major economy has pulled off in modern history. It's the kind of growth that transformed entire cities, lifted hundreds of millions out of poverty, and created a booming middle class. But what's driving this growth? One of the biggest factors is foreign direct investment, FDI, the money flowing into China from global businesses looking to set up factories, offices, and supply chains. In 2023 alone, China's net FDI inflows accounted for 0.24% of its GDP. That might seem small, but in absolute terms, we're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars pouring into the country. Foreign investors are drawn to China for 2 major reasons. The massive consumer market, with over 1.4 billion people, China has one of the largest consumer bases in the world. Companies know that if they can tap into even a fraction of this market, they can make billions. The global manufacturing advantage, even with rising labor costs, China remains a production hub due to its well-developed infrastructure, skilled labor force, and massive supply chain networks. And speaking of trade, China's export dominance is reflected in its trade balance. In 2023, China maintained a trade surplus of 2.38% of its GDP. That means China exports far more than it imports, which strengthens its currency, builds up foreign reserves, and fuels even more investment into domestic industries. But this trade surplus also comes with global consequences. Many Western economies, particularly the United States and European Union, have raised concerns that China's export-driven economy is undercutting domestic industries. This has led to trade disputes, tariffs, and policy battles, which we'll explore later. For now, the takeaway is clear: China's economic engine is still running strong, fueled by foreign investment, a massive trade surplus, and steady GDP growth. But what does this look like on the ground? To really understand how these policies play out in real life, let's zoom in on one of China's greatest economic success stories, Shenzhen. Imagine this: in the 1970s, Shenzhen was a quiet fishing village with a population of about 30,000 people. It had little industry, no skyscrapers, and barely any connection to the global economy. Fast forward to today, Shenzhen is a high-tech metropolis with over 17 million residents, a GDP per capita of $27,000, and the headquarters of some of the biggest tech companies in the world. So, how did this happen? The answer lies in China's Special Economic Zone (SEZ) strategy. In 1980, Shenzhen was designated as China's very first SEZ, and this wasn't just any policy shift. This was a radical experiment in capitalism, unlike anything China had done before. Within the SEZ, the Chinese government relaxed trade restrictions, cut corporate taxes, encouraged private business, and actively sought foreign investment. The results were explosive. Multinational companies, especially from Hong Kong and Taiwan, rushed in to set up factories and production hubs. Manufacturing boomed, exports soared, and within just a few decades, Shenzhen became the backbone of China's electronics industry. And this transformation wasn't just about economic policy, it was about infrastructure and innovation. The Chinese government poured billions into roads, ports, and high-speed rail, making Shenzhen a logistical powerhouse. And then came the real turning point: Shenzhen evolved beyond manufacturing into a tech innovation hub. Today, it's home to some of the biggest names in global technology, including Huawei, one of the world's largest telecom and smartphone companies; Tencent, the company behind WeChat, one of the most used social platforms in the world; DJI, the global leader in drone technology. The city became China's Silicon Valley, attracting engineers, scientists, and entrepreneurs from all over the world. The government even designated parts of the city as research and development hubs, offering grants and incentives to tech startups. And the numbers speak for themselves. Shenzhen's GDP per capita hit $27,000 in 2023, a massive jump from just a few $100s in the 1980s. That's higher than many major cities in developing nations, and in some cases, it even rivals parts of the United States and Europe. But here's the key takeaway: Shenzhen's success was not a fluke. It was a carefully engineered transformation, showing how China strategically used SEZs as economic launchpads. And once Shenzhen proved this model worked, the government expanded it to other cities, accelerating China's rise even further. And speaking of game-changing companies, let's move on to one of the biggest economic forces in China today, Alibaba. When we think of e-commerce giants, most people immediately think of Amazon. But in China, Alibaba reigns supreme. This isn't just another online retailer. Alibaba is an economic powerhouse that has transformed the way China does business, from shopping and finance to cloud computing and logistics. Let's start with Alibaba's e-commerce dominance. The company operates Taobao and Tmall, the two largest online shopping platforms in China. Imagine if Amazon and eBay merged into a single massive digital marketplace, where millions of independent sellers run their own stores while Alibaba takes a cut. That's what Taobao is. Unlike Amazon, where the company itself sells products directly, Alibaba's model is decentralized. It connects buyers and sellers, creating a vast ecosystem where millions of businesses, from tiny startups to massive corporations, can sell their goods. This business-to-consumer (B2C) and business-to-business (B2B) model has made Alibaba the backbone of China's digital economy. Now, what really sets Alibaba apart is its expansion beyond e-commerce. It revolutionized digital finance with Alipay, run by Ant Group. Think of Alipay like PayPal, but on steroids. It's an all-in-one digital wallet that handles bill payments, investments, insurance, and loans, all through a mobile app. It has over 1 billion users and has fundamentally changed how Chinese consumers and businesses handle transactions. But Alibaba didn't stop there. It also dominates cloud computing. Alibaba Cloud is the largest cloud provider in Asia, competing with Amazon Web Services, AWS, Google Cloud, and Microsoft Azure. This isn't just about storage, it powers China's AI, big data, and corporate digital infrastructure. Why does this matter? Because the future of the global economy is digital, and China has made sure it's not just keeping up, it's leading the charge. Alibaba's impact on China's economy is enormous. It provides millions of jobs, fuels countless small businesses, and has expanded China's digital footprint beyond its borders. And what's even more fascinating, Alibaba is just one part of China's larger tech revolution. To fully grasp how China is reshaping the global economy, we have to look at China's advancements in artificial intelligence. China has poured billions into AI development, recognizing that whoever controls AI controls the future of the global economy. This is why the Chinese government has made AI a national priority, aiming to become the world leader in AI by 2030. And they're well on their way. Let's start with the sheer scale of investment. China is projected to invest $38 billion into AI development by 2025. That's more than most countries' entire tech budgets combined. And this isn't just one sector. AI is being integrated into everything, from manufacturing and finance to surveillance and military applications. A big part of this push comes from China's AI giants, companies that are driving the AI revolution forward. Some of the biggest players include Baidu, China's answer to Google, leading in AI-driven search, self-driving cars, and deep learning research. Alibaba, not just an e-commerce giant, but a major force in AI-powered logistics, cloud computing, and recommendation algorithms. Tencent, the company behind WeChat, using AI for everything from social media algorithms to facial recognition. China's AI development is everywhere, but one of its most controversial aspects is its use in government and society. AI is widely used for surveillance, particularly in smart cities where cameras equipped with facial recognition technology track people in real time. This system is designed to monitor everything from crime prevention to social behavior. Beyond surveillance, AI is also transforming industries like healthcare, finance, and logistics. Hospitals are using AI-powered diagnostics, banks are using AI-driven fraud detection, and supply chains are becoming more automated than ever before. But here's where things get even more interesting. China isn't just adopting AI, it's setting the global standards for it. As Western countries struggle with AI regulation, data privacy concerns, and ethical debates, China is moving full speed ahead. This has allowed it to rapidly deploy AI at a scale that no other country has matched. And what does this mean for the global economy? China's AI leadership could shift the balance of technological power away from the US and Europe, making China the center of the AI-driven world. But there's a challenge: not everyone is happy about China's growing influence in AI, trade, and technology. In fact, tensions between China and the US have been boiling over in recent years, especially when it comes to trade wars, supply chain shifts, and technology restrictions. That's exactly what we'll cover next: the complex and often heated relationship between the US and China in global trade. For decades, the United States and China have had one of the most complex economic relationships in history, a mix of partnership and rivalry, cooperation and conflict. But in recent years, the relationship has become more tense than ever, especially when it comes to trade and technology. The US-China trade war officially began in 2018, but the tensions behind it have been brewing for far longer. The core issue? The US argues that China's trade practices, industrial policies, and government subsidies give it an unfair advantage in the global market. China, on the other hand, sees the US as trying to contain its economic rise and protect its own industries from competition. So what actually happened? Let's break it down. It started with tariffs, lots of them. The US imposed billions of dollars worth of tariffs on Chinese goods, covering everything from steel and aluminum to electronics and textiles. The idea was to make Chinese products more expensive so that US companies would source materials elsewhere or move their production back to the US. But China responded with its own tariffs, hitting American agricultural products, automobiles, and technology sectors. The result? A full-scale trade war that disrupted global supply chains, raised costs for businesses, and led to economic slowdowns on both sides. But tariffs were just the beginning. The US also cracked down on China's technology sector, placing severe restrictions on Chinese tech companies, and Huawei became the biggest target. The US accused Huawei of being a security threat, banning it from using American technology and cutting off its access to critical semiconductors and 5G infrastructure. And this leads us to one of the most critical battles of the modern economy: the fight over semiconductors. These tiny chips power everything from smartphones and computers to AI and military technology. The US imposed export controls on advanced chips, preventing China from acquiring the most cutting-edge semiconductor technology. Why does this matter? Because without access to the most advanced chips, China's AI development, quantum computing, and even military capabilities could fall behind. In response, China has invested billions into its own semiconductor industry, but catching up to the US, Taiwan, and South Korea is no easy task. But the trade war isn't just about technology and manufacturing, it's also reshaping global supply chains. For decades, multinational corporations have relied on China as the world's factory. But now, with rising trade tensions, many companies are moving production to countries like Vietnam, India, and Mexico to reduce their dependence on China. Still, China remains deeply embedded in global trade, and even as companies diversify, no country can yet match China's scale, efficiency, and supply chain dominance. At its core, this trade war isn't just about tariffs or technology, it's about which country will dominate the global economy in the 21st century. China has already surpassed the US in manufacturing, exports, and infrastructure investment, but the US still holds key advantages in semiconductors, AI research, and global finance. And while the trade war rages on, China is pivoting toward the future, investing heavily in AI, green energy, and high-tech industries to ensure that it remains a dominant economic force for decades to come. And that brings us to our final section: where is China's economy headed, and what role will it play in shaping the global order? Right now, China stands at a crossroads. It's still experiencing strong economic growth, but challenges are emerging that could shape the next phase of its development. One of the biggest questions is whether China can sustain its rapid economic expansion. While it once grew at double-digit rates, growth is now slowing to around 4 to 5% per year, still impressive, but a sign that the era of unstoppable Chinese growth may be cooling off. A major challenge is demographics. China's population is aging, and fast. The one-child policy, in place for decades, has led to a shrinking workforce. By 2050, nearly a third of China's population will be over 60. This could slow economic productivity and put pressure on government resources. Another issue? Debt and real estate bubbles. China's economic rise was fueled by massive government spending and debt-financed infrastructure projects, but now, many of its cities are overbuilt, with entire apartment complexes sitting empty. The real estate sector makes up around 25% of China's economy, and any major collapse could have severe ripple effects. But China isn't just reacting to these challenges, it's actively pivoting toward new industries. The country is pouring money into artificial intelligence, green energy, biotechnology, and semiconductor production, all with the goal of reducing reliance on foreign technology and becoming a self-sufficient economic powerhouse. And then there's China's global strategy, which is where things get even more interesting. Through its Belt and Road Initiative, China is expanding its economic influence worldwide, funding trillions of dollars worth of infrastructure projects in Asia, Africa, and Europe. This is China's way of cementing itself as the leader of a new economic order, creating trade routes and alliances that strengthen its global position. Of course, this comes with pushback. Many Western nations, particularly the US and Europe, see China's rise as a direct challenge to their influence, leading to economic sanctions, trade restrictions, and geopolitical conflicts. So, what's the big picture? China's economic transformation is one of the most significant events in modern history. It went from a poor, isolated country to the world's second-largest economy in just a few decades. And despite challenges ahead, China is far from slowing down. Whether it can maintain its dominance, overcome its economic hurdles, and continue shaping the future of global trade and technology remains to be seen. One thing is certain, China's story is far from over. And that wraps up today's deep dive. If you enjoyed this breakdown of China's economic rise, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more history and economics content. And if you want to learn about other major economic transformations in history, check out some of the other videos on this channel. There's a lot more to explore. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.